Hey, what's up? So, Teenage Engineering just released a massive update to their KO sampler series, the EP-133 KOii. It's quite a lot to say for a name, but it is looking awesome. With some updated features and workflow compared to the original KO, it brings it a little more in line with samplers like the SP404 Mark II. But here's the thing, the original PO-33 KO has a few features that are missing on this new one, and it still packs a serious punch, especially with that unmistakable lo-fi bit-crushing goodness. So today, instead of giving into G.A.S, or otherwise known as gear acquisition syndrome, let's explore why the original PO-33 still holds its ground and remains, in my opinion, an essential sampler. I've got 5 reasons. Let me know if you have some other ones in the comments. Let's get into it. So the PO-33 has an 8-bit sample rate. Its old school crunchiness is very reminiscent of early samplers like the SP202, MPCs. It's a noisy, low sampling bit rate that adds a distinctive character to everything you sample in. Let me show you what I mean by playing some piano I sent into it. Of course the track was pristine, clean, but once you put it in the PO-33, listen to that grittiness. And what's great about the PO-33 is it has a filter that's per sample, and per pad you can do per step automation. You can add this filter so if you wanted to, you could get out some of that crunchiness that comes baked into the samples once you send it in. But this grittiness and the warmth that comes from it is a quality that's hard to replicate when everything is recorded in at a nice, clean 16-bit, which again is what you're getting with the EP-133. As of now, there's no effects that have been added to the 133 that can reduce the sample rate of what you're sampling in. Like on the SP404, you have lo-fi effects, bit crusher, and things like that. If you're going for that old school vibe or want to alter or color samples that you're working with, sending them through this is a great way to add some warmth and grit. Portability is key, especially for someone like me who has a newborn baby and can't get in the studio much. The PO-33 can fit in your pocket and go everywhere with you. Plus, with its built-in mic, you can capture random sounds and use them for drums, melodies, anything in your beats. And yes, to be fair, the EP-133 has a mic too, but the PO-33's compact size, especially in comparison to other samplers, but really anything, I mean, look at this. It could fit anywhere, it can go in your pocket. That sort of compact size is unmatched in the sampling world. Alright, so sometimes, let's be honest, most times, simplicity is the key to creativity. The PO-33 has a very straightforward workflow. What you see is what you get. There's really no menu diving. There's a couple of button prompts that do different things. One of the weirdest is to copy and delete patterns. It's a couple weird button prompts and you have to do them in a certain order. But this intuitive design encourages experimentation. Everything is right here in front of you. You don't have to worry about menu diving. So if you're new to a sampler, it's a nice way to get into sampling. If you have a ton of samplers, the workflow is great when it comes to chopping or even just to get that grittiness without having to buy a vintage sampler that's gonna cost a ton. This thing's only $100. Here's where the PO-3 has the EP-133 beat. There could always be firmware updates. The PO-33 has easy to use step sequencing and programming by selecting a sample or a specific chop of that sample and hitting the right button. There is a sequencer on the EP-133, but it's not as straightforward and seems far more intended to be used as a live recorder with quantization. Now, if we wanted to do something with the filter, we would have to go into the actual sound. So just motion stepped or automated all of those movements I was making. Now for this one, if you're doing filter automation, you don't enable the record mode. You actually have to hold down the record and do it in the per step mode. A little bit wonky, but it does work. This is great for sculpting your sounds, especially when working with samples. You can really change how they sound with just a couple of tweaks and moving things around. It also makes things sound a lot more alive, for lack of a better word, because you have things moving all the time. So it's good ear candy in that way. All right, let's talk some numbers. So the PO-33 is $99 versus a slightly heftier $300 for the EP-133. As of filming, the PO-33 is still available on the Teenage Engineering website, and if you pair it with a $5 app like Koala Sampler, you're unlocking basically all of the functionality of the EP-133 for a much lower cost. It's a budget-friendly option without compromising on creativity should you want to explore more than what the PO-33 can offer on its own. So I've been singing the praises of all of this video, but I do want to mention some of its cons, especially in comparison to the EP-133 and other samplers on the market. The first thing, and this is the biggest, is its polyphony. It only has 4-voice polyphony. So what that means is you can only trigger 4 sounds at the same time. So if you have, let's say, 2 sounds on the one-shot mode and you want 2 different drum sounds, you would be taking up all 4, and everything is monophonic, and that can become a bit of an issue. You can't do chords in one-shot mode, so unless you're sampling in a chord, 4 voices can get kind of limiting. I honestly find myself working much more in the chop section than in the one-shot section. In my opinion, this limitation is actually kind of a blessing, and this isn't a justification. It can get very annoying, don't get me wrong. Being forced to work within 4-voice polyphony means you gotta get creative, so sometimes that means sampling drums in where you can have specific sounds all hitting at the same time so that you can chop it and have just the kick and the hi-hat at the same time, or sample in a chord progression. So all of this is from one single sample pad from the chop pad, so I could add 3 more sounds up here, or I could add additional drums, and I already have the bulk of the sound coming from just a pad, so that gives you some flexibility. In comparison to the EP-133, that has 12-voice polyphony if you're doing mono sampling. If you're doing stereo sampling, it's 6-voice polyphony. That would give you a lot more flexibility. The sequencer is a lot more powerful on the EP-133. This, again, is very straightforward, which is a plus in some instances, but it can also be a con, as you can't get into the very gritty tweaking of sounds. Also, I know I mentioned it as a plus, and I do view it as a plus, but not everybody wants that low bitrate crunchiness or grittiness. Sometimes it's good to have the option to have that clean and pristine sound. What you get is what you get with the pocket operator, so you get that sound. That can be offset by pairing it with something like Wallace Sampler or the SP404, but it's something you need to consider. You could even use this to just color sounds and then put them in a DAW and then flesh out the song in a DAW with higher resolution samples. I like the grittiness of it, especially if you throw it into another sampler or your DAW, compress it, do all sorts of sound design to it, and use it as the backbone of a sound or of a song, but then build on it with other qualities. So not everything is in that lo-fi sound. But I'll tell you, if you just YouTube pocket operator beats, you'll hear how creative people can get using just one pocket operator with just those 4 voices. It's crazy. It's incredibly inspiring. Let's talk about making the most out of the PO-33. I want to give a couple of tips to get the best out of this machine because there's so much that it can do. It just takes a little figuring out and learning. So the first thing is, if sample time is an issue and you need a longer segment of a sound that you're putting in, sample it at a higher octave and then repitch it on the machine. All you have to do is when you have the sample, go to, I think that's tone, but T-O-N, and just drop the pitch back down. You drop it an octave. Since you're sampling it at a higher speed, you can get in a lot more duration, and then when you drop it down in pitch, it will bring it back to the original sound, but you'll have all that time that you couldn't get by just playing it at the normal speed. So the next one is to chain multiple patterns together to play full songs or to extend the steps beyond the 16 steps of a single pattern. So all you have to do is hit the pattern button and just select all the ones you want to play in the order that you want them to play, and they'll start playing. You'll see it's on 1, it's on 2, and it's on 3. And it just keeps going, and then it'll just loop back. So this is how you can do songs on here. You could also do a crude live set by choosing all the patterns you want in the order they're gonna play. Might be a pretty short live set, but it is an option. All right, so the next one is to try recording samples into both of these sample types that you get. So 1 through 8 are chromatic, which means every pad on here is going to be a different pitch. So let me choose one so you can hear. You could, like I said, put a long sample into one of these, but what that will do is just repitch the sample, which you can also just do is by going to the tone section and just dropping it down. Now, over in 9 through 16, these are chops or auto chops. So if you put a sound into it like this, will be chopped up into 16 pads, and you can then go into this to change the duration. You can change each chop's duration and position, so they don't all have to be in the same order that they're sampled in. You can move it around, and you can extend the sample length by using the right one. And in the chop mode, you can still repitch and add filters. What if you really like the sound of the PO-33, but its limitations are just a little too much for you? Add another sampler. That's my opinion. This is a great way to get all of the benefits of the PO-33 and none of the weaknesses. So I have right next to me the SP-404 Mark II, and in my opinion, this is one of the best sampler combos available. But you could pair it even with the EP-133, and then you're getting the best of both worlds. You can get the lo-fi goodness of this. You can do the fun, straightforward workflow and sample chopping, then resample it, which neither the PO-33 or EP-133 can do. But if you're using the SP-404 or KOii sampler, you can resample those sounds into here, add effects, do whatever you want, sequence it on a much more complex sequencer, and then you've got a full track. Try experimenting with different things. So there you have it. Those are my 5 reasons why I still love the PO-33 KO and think it's still a force to be reckoned with in the world of samplers. This video is by no means meant to hate on the EP-133. I think it looks incredible. I just think it's always a good idea to look at what's offered and whether you need it. For me, some of the features that are missing on the EP-133, at least as of now, aren't enough to justify either replacing or supplementing what the PO-33 can already do, especially in my setup as it is. I actually posted a poll right here on YouTube asking my subscribers what they think about the EP-133, and I was a little shocked by the results. 50 or 60 people voted, and the large majority actually said it looks great, but it's not for them right now or they don't need it. And that's where I'm at right now. I think it looks awesome. I'd love to get it at some point, but it's not enough to justify getting it right now with what I already have. I appreciate everyone sharing their voice in the poll, and this channel is supported by channel members right here on YouTube. So if you want all of the samples I make in videos, the full beats and more, hit the join button. It's the best way to help support the channel, and I appreciate you checking it out. But of course, just hanging out is more than enough. So if you've got a pocket operator or are intending to get one and want to learn how to make the most of its workflow, check out this video next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.